It doesn't mean that all things start as good, but that all things can get back to good with work. The point is, discipline doesn't always come. If when faced with two options, we are able to choose the better option. Sometimes discipline comes when we are not given any options to begin with. If you're trying to discover who you are after a breakup, then stopping the ex is only going to cause you more trauma. How will you feel when you achieve that goal? You'd like. Your goal isn't as far off as you think it is, but it will only continue to be pushed further and further away if you aren't able to master the courage you need to start today. I don't care how long your confidence has been dead. It Good morning, guys. I hope you guys are doing well. Welcome and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Achinge from Kenya. Please consider subscribing, like the video, leave a sweet comment in the comment section. Let me know what you think about the video. And if you're a cheese squad, you know how we do it here. Thank you so much for always coming back to check up on your girl, to know how your girl is doing. I'm doing great, as you can see. I'm just waking up and I'm feeling so good. I thank God for life. I thank God for the good health, and I just thank God for everything. Above all, I just thank God for everything. So guys, today is gonna mark our day 4 of reading. Is it day 4? Day 2? Yes. So today marks our day 3 of our story time session, as you guys always say. So if you're watching this and maybe you haven't watched like the previous story sessions, or rather self-improvement sessions, please go check them out. It's all about positivity and good vibes here. So make sure you support your girl. Like the video, leave a comment in the comment section, guys. So guys, it's been raining the whole night and it's still raining. So that's why you're hearing that sound. So the title for today is Eyes Wide Open. And with Ike, if that position is correct, then then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves coverings. That is Genesis 3 verse 7. Have you ever been watching a scary movie and instinctively closed your eyes when the frightening part was coming because you just didn't want to see it? If so, in that moment, were you afraid that you would miss out on something and the plot will no longer make any sense? I doubt it. Usually the only important thing in that moment is that you protect yourself from having terrifying images etched in your mind. Closing our eyes often seems like the only way we can possibly survive the big and scary. We aren't born with the innate ability to predict when a movie is going to display a scene that we'd rather not see. Our experience with films and the way they generally progress helps us use our instincts to avoid seeing something we'd rather not see. Once you've become accustomed to not giving yourself permission to look at what scares you, it's hard to break the rhythm of closing your eyes when it comes on. If your life were a movie, this part will be fine. But when we close our eyes to what scares us in real life, we miss the opportunity to live fearlessly. Avoiding what scares you means that what scares you is in control of you. Not long ago, my husband got a motorcycle. He watched every YouTube video he could find about operating the bike. He read the owner's manual, took the courses, and practiced riding back and forth in our driveway. Eventually, He ventured outside of the driveway. Little by little, he extended his distance, but he was intentional about not getting on the highway. He mapped out his routes before leaving the house to make sure that he could avoid the highway and still reach his destination. I know eventually he will get on the highway, but for now, because his knowledge of the bike is so limited, he is not ready to be that vulnerable. That question now controls how he functions and navigates when riding his bike. This is what happens to us when we are controlled by what we don't want to see again. It's why I couldn't recognize that moment when I was 7 years old and missing the comfort of sitting next to my mother in church as a trauma. There was a part of me that closed my eyes to that moment because I didn't want to remember it. Yet my desire not to feel that way again controlled how I would change my personality depending on the room I entered. In chapter 2, I hope you could identify the event when your environment shifted, which changed your thoughts and your actions. In preparing to lay the framework for moving forward, consider how what you've experienced has affected what you believe. Additionally, I will discuss how you can create a plan to tackle the things you have yet to experience. This is like a subtopic, good and evil. Some things are undeniably evil. If you need an example, just turn on the news and check out any of the top stories. Murder, rape, abuse, terrorism, racism, and so many other forms of darkness are constantly being shown. Without fail, somewhere in the discussion someone asks a question attempting to make peace with how God could allow certain things to happen. I found the answer in the garden. When Adam and Eve ate from the forbidden fruit, Genesis tells us that their eyes were opened. Nothing in the text suggests that Adam or Eve were created physically blind. However, the moment they ate from the fruit is clearly defined as a moment where something in them went from being blind to being aware. We generally attribute the fall of humanity to Eve creating fruit from a forbidden tree. The tree, however, had a name, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die. Genesis 2:17. Before they ate from this tree, they had no knowledge of good and evil. All they had was their reality. They saw their reality as neither good nor evil. It was just theirs. For some reason, God did not want humanity to have the knowledge of good and evil. God didn't want you to be able to look at your body as good or look at your failures as evil. He didn't want you to be able to look at those who hurt you or whom you hurt as evil. He didn't even want you to see those who helped you as good. He decided for us to have an existence that wasn't restricted to categories. Unfortunately, that ship has sailed, and now we are living in a world where we see too much of almost everything. In 2020, a black man by the name George Floyd was killed by a Minneapolis police officer. The officer, Derek Chauvin, claimed that Floyd was resisting arrest. In an effort to restrain him, he laid Floyd on his stomach on the ground and pinned his knee to the back of his neck. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, Floyd pleaded with the officer to release him. He cried out for his dead mother. He repeated the words, "He can't breathe," until he took his very last breath. This video showing his death went viral. Social media was ablaze with righteous indignation about Floyd's death and the systematic racism and dehumanization that has plagued the black community for centuries. The beauty and frustration of social media is that you're not engaging exclusively with people who like you. Instead, just a click away is a barrage of personalities with viewpoints that can create internal conflict and dialogue that affect your mental and emotional well-being. That's exactly what happened as I went down that rabbit hole of people sharing their thoughts about the death of George Floyd. I was exposed to so many articles that discouraged, enraged, or disappointed me that eventually I had to make a decision to stop seeking opinions and viewpoints that upset me. I came to a point when I realized I wasn't following those people for a reason and I didn't want to continue exposing myself to that level of rhetoric. I had an epiphany in the middle of my mental argument with myself about the latest content I just read. As I was thinking, how could someone even say something like that? It suddenly occurred to me that I was never supposed to see it in the first place. I had been searching out conversations that I knew would upset me when I could have just been a faithful member of Mind Your Business Ministries. I started judging those people because I didn't agree with them. In my mind, I thought of them as evil and myself as good. That realization changed the way I consume social media. The beauty and the complexity of social media is that there is a diversity of thought. I've learned to limit my exposure to social media so I have space to intentionally dissect my own thoughts before being swayed by so many different opinions. I now realize there are some pockets of the internet I must avoid at all costs for the sake of my mental, emotional, and spiritual state. The other thing that happened to Adam and Eve when their eyes were opened was that they saw they were naked. This gives us insight into how the knowledge of good and evil affected how they saw themselves. Before eating from before eating from the tree, they were naked. But they didn't see that as problematic. After they ate from the tree, they saw their nakedness and judged it as wrong. They were never supposed to see their vulnerability as something to be ashamed of. I wonder what else we were never meant to see. That's how I view the atrocities that have taken place in the world. I don't see them as things God allowed. I see them as things God never wanted us to see. God did not intend for there to be slavery, racism, murder, hate, cancer, or death. Evil existed, as evidenced by the serpent in the garden, but evil didn't have anything in its environment until Eve subjected herself to it by eating the fruit. What was done cannot be undone. But Romans 8:28 details how God can use all things to get them back to good. And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are the for those who are the called according to his purpose. It doesn't mean that all things start as good, but that all things can get back to good with work. That is nice. That's what you are doing right now. You are learning how to allow God to work in your life until He is able to look at it and be reminded of the most repeated phrase in Genesis 1, God saw that it was good. How, then, do we prepare ourselves for the next batch of things that are bound to come our way that we were never meant to see? You come to a place where you can control, contain, and compare what you see. Perhaps when you saw that word compare, you were like, but sis, you just told us not to compare ourselves. I know. Just keep an open mind, and I'll explain it in more detail. Let's begin with control. So our next subtopic is control and replace. Our eyes are open to everything good and bad. There's nothing we can do to change it now, so we must learn to navigate the world we are in. Fitness enthusiasts who train people to no longer have muffin tops make healthy lifestyle changes, and avoid thigh chafing. Say the first step in changing your diet is to throw out all the bad stuff. Allegedly, the more work it takes to eat badly, the more it deters you from eating badly. I tried this once and it's true. I definitely didn't go out of my way to eat bad things when they weren't within reach. Just as a sidebar, if you're considering to do this, I I did have a major attitude when I had all this salad in my fridge. That's not the point though. The point is discipline doesn't always come. If when faced with two options, we are able to choose the better option. Sometimes discipline comes when we are not given any options to begin with. That makes sense with the diet. But let's talk about how that plays out in the areas of our life. My decision to no longer seek out the commentary and agendas that upset me regarding the George Floyd case was an intentional decision to maintain my focus on equality and justice. When I focused my attention and time on the people who typically don't express concern for the racial inequities of America, in America, yet was speaking out for the first time, I felt hopeful and optimistic that change can occur. That was opposed to the comments I was reading in social media that made me feel like no matter how much progress we make, we'll always be behind. Like a premature baby in need of special attention to survive, I needed to incubate my hope. I could not allow it to be exposed to commentary that will knock me off center. As you begin to incubate yourself for this transformation, it's important that you be disciplined about more than just what you think. You need to incubate what you allow yourselves to see too. Emphasize on the phrase what you allow. Some things are going to happen that are ultimately out of your control. I'm not referring to those things. Focus on the willful moments when we open ourselves to take in content that weakens our will to become whole. If you're trying to discover who you are after a breakup, then stalking the ex is only going to cause you more trauma. You don't need to know how he's talking. You don't need to know who he's talking to now or how his life has progressed at the expense of you stagnating. The same is true if you're trying to save money. You may have to unsubscribe from marketing emails targeting your bank account. If we aren't careful, we'll subject ourselves to narrative that suggests our maturity is contingent on the ability to say no to meals when we are trying to lose weight, remain friends after a breakup, or to go shopping without dipping into our savings. Maturity is not just being able to say no. It's it, it's also about making sure that you're not in a position that makes you waver in the first place. When you recognize that what you subject yourself to truly plays a role in who you become more diligent about protecting yourself from what you see, read, and listen to. Miracles on miracles. Count your miracles. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't even count them all. I can't even count them all. I can't even count them all. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can't even count them all. I can't even count them all. Guys, me, I promised myself this year I'm gonna lock in. And I thank God for this, like the strength that I have in me. Like, yo, I can't even tell it. But I know God is watching. And God is not okay. I'm not gonna say much about that, but it's okay. Let's proceed. That was by the way. When you subscribe to a negative narrative for a long time, changing can be hard, but it's worth it. One of the most powerful scriptures I've read about God details how he sees the transgressions of his creation. I, even I, am he who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and I will not remember your sins. That is Isaiah 43:25. Confirms that for him to maintain his identity as the holy God, he doesn't allow himself to see where we've missed the mark. God is talking about controlling his sight to maintain his identity. The scripture is clear that it doesn't blot out our transgressions for our benefit, but it does it for my own sake. We are created in God's image, and if we want to truly strive to be like him, then we must come to a place where we commit to controlling our sight to protect our identity. What are you consuming with your eyes that deflates your momentum? Whatever it is, I challenge you to become an active participant in your growth by no longer waiting until you have the strength to take it all in, but instead giving yourself only one direction to look. This doesn't just apply to how you see the world around you, but also how you see your journey. You have to be willing to see yourself as more than your past. Every attempt I made at moving forward in life was thwarted because I couldn't see beyond my shame. I didn't think it was possible for me to have made a mistake and still be a good girl. I only saw myself as a broken person, and so that's all I became. My ability to identify and celebrate my goodness allowed me to look beyond the moments when I knew better but didn't do better. I guess you can say I started listening to that voice inside me. If you're going to keep things completely transparent in this book, we should admit that there's usually a voice inside us that tries to nudge us when we know we're looking at something that we shouldn't. Listen to that voice. That voice is trying to help you. Fortunately for you, I'm not just asking you to control what you see, but listen the ways that you must become blind. Instead, I want to challenge you to take it one step further and replace what you are seeing with images that motivate you to become. OMG, this is getting good. OMG. Oh my god. It's one thing to control it's one thing to control what you see, but there's another level of growth that comes when you replace it. Sure, we can throw all the garbage out of the pantry, but if we don't replace it with something that is actually beneficial at keeping us on track, we'll return to our old habits. When I threw away that junk food and was stuck with salad, your girl was struggling. When I threw away that junk and replaced it with delicious and healthy recipes, your girl was thriving. When what is ahead of you is greater than what is behind you, you can walk away from that which no longer serves. Guys, let me just repeat that. Let me just repeat that. When what is ahead of you is greater than what is behind you, you can walk away from that which no longer serves. Working it out. Grab that journal you've been using and let's reverse engineering. This thing. What do you want to see in your life that you currently don't see? Before you get started about the cars, houses, or relationships, let's begin with you as a person. There's a difference between saying, I want to lose 20 pounds, and saying, I want to become more disciplined. It's easy to maintain a conviction to change when we have a goal rooted in who we want to become versus what we want to have. Number 2, how will you feel when you achieve that goal? Identifying what success feels like is important. If we focus exclusively on what success looks like, we can be deterred, especially if we feel we have a long way to go before realizing that vision. If feeling successful and becoming more disciplined makes you feel confident, then the moment you make one disciplined decision, that seed of confidence is one step closer to producing tangible fruit. Number three. Now for the hard question. What's keeping you from achieving that goal? Sometimes we aren't motivated to do the work to achieve our goal because the full realization of it requires more discipline or work than we have to give. You don't have to pay in full to start working toward your goal today. It's very rare that someone purchases a car or home and has all the money up front. More times than not, a person makes a down payment and then begins to make regular payments until they own what they were pursuing in the first place. You don't have the motivation, energy, faith, or discipline, or radically transform your life all at once. No one does. All you need is enough for a down payment. The more we see our culture decrease the turnout for gratification, the more impatient we become when we don't see our lives begin to move as quickly as we would like. Your goal isn't as far off as you think it is, but it will only continue to be pushed further and further away if you aren't able to master the courage you need to start today. This is a special note. Before I close out the subject of controlling and replacing what we see, let's face up to something we all struggle with: how we view our bodies. This begins with the understanding that every part of us, from the inside out, has been awakened to the knowledge of good and evil. We see certain parts of our bodies and we think to ourselves, good. Then we see another part of our bodies and say, evil. We cannot compartmentalize ourselves like that. God created us as beautiful mosaic of peaks and valleys, highs and lows. There have been moments when I've got a glimpse of my body in the mirror and a part of me grieved that the area wasn't total and more defined. I know I'm not the only one who has been there. The grief in that moment is how our confidence shrivels and dies. The good news is that our confidence can come back to life. The next time you look in the mirror and your old way of looking at your body begins to cool, the music for the funeral procession for your confidence, pull the cord and survey every inch of your body until you find something to love. Girl, you cannot start with nothing but a small mole. You better work that mole, name that mole, tell that mole she's beautiful, lotion that mole, and let her shine. I don't care how long your confidence has been dead. It can always be resurrected. You can even start researching body positivity blogs and influencers who can help you jumpstart your journey. There's an influencer for every shape and size. I've been practicing this in my own life. When my skin goes on its monthly time travel, in its monthly time travel to adolescent puberty, I look in the mirror and my initial thoughts about how ugly, bad, or just downright evil my pimples are. Immediately, I force myself to stop thinking negatively about myself and replace that thought with something that makes me feel good. Activate this rhythm in your life. Control the negative narrative by stopping it in its tracks. Replace the negative narrative with a higher thought of the beauty God created when He made you. Contain and embrace. Controlling what we allow to take up space in our vision limits unnecessary exposure to things that weaken our progress. What do we do with the moments that invade the bubble we're creating? This is where containment comes in. In March 2020, the same year George Floyd was murdered, the world also experienced the COVID 19 pandemic. The spread of the novel coronavirus was far and wide. Immediately, governments around the world began placing restrictions on how citizens could engage and gather. Seemingly overnight, the world began resembling a science fiction film. People began wearing masks. Everyone was expected to maintain a 6 foot distance at all times. Only businesses deemed essential were able to remain open, and public gatherings were prohibited. I thought that it would go away as quickly as it came, that the spread of the virus would be contained, and that life would return to normal by July when I was planning to host a conference. As the weeks passed, I witnessed events of all types of transition, from in person to virtual. The more it became clear that I wouldn't be able to host the conference, the more upset I became. It didn't matter that my husband has been leading our church through online only services for months. Selfishly, I felt entitled for my plans to be unscathed by the consequences of the shutdown. As I was sorting through my emotions, I started thinking about the people who have become my mentors and heroes. They had incredibly survival stories about facing cancer, bankruptcy, disloyalty, and so much more. All were forced to see things they didn't want to see. I realized that I was praying for the same testimony of strength and survival to be on my life as I'd witnessed on theirs, but I didn't want the struggle that produces the strength. Sis, your girl just preached. When people comment others on their strength, it's because they made it look easy. But when you are the one earning the strength, you become intimately acquainted with the struggle. I knew I was going to have I knew I was going to have to face all the emotional and practical implications of postponing the conference. As I was faced with releasing volunteers, refunding customers, and worrying with vendors, I couldn't help but begin to feel like I'd failed in some way. I was beating myself up for not being prepared for the unknown. I started thinking about all the things I should have done differently, but then I remembered a very deep and powerful mantra my father shares with us often. You don't know until you know. You don't know until you know. Oh wow. It doesn't seem that deep when I type it out, but I promise you this saying has rung so true in my life. When we are confronted with things we don't see or we'd rather not see, we are strengthened and prepared to know better the next time around. Have you ever had one of those random urges to declutter your kitchen? You find yourself at the local dollar store or container store so you can purchase containers to make your shelves look more uniform. The flour, sugar, oatmeal, and pasta all come in their own packaging. It looks great in the store, but cluttered in our pantries. So we take the items of their original packaging and place them in a matching containers with the labels. We repeat this process until our shelves have gone from chaos to order. That's essentially what I want you to do with your life. As you take in and process what's happening around you, organize and place your thoughts and emotions in appropriately sized containers with accurate labels so that they are not scattered about. Pay special attention to those boxes that already have a label, as many of them may need to be repackaged. For instance, my experience with postponing the conference came in package that initially felt like anxiety and failure. I could have left that in its original package and decided to not categorize it properly, but I knew that would eat away at me on the inside. I married my admiration for my mentors with the experience and placed it in a new container labeled necessary for growth. By seeing it properly, I was able to embrace it even though it was a struggle. Containing our thoughts and emotions is not the same as repressing them. Containing our emotions is an opportunity to have self intimacy. Self intimacy allows us to give God access to the most tender, frustrated, broken parts of our lives. If we don't acknowledge how what we see wounds us, then we can go to the church every week but never truly encounter God. Conversely, when we make a practice of breaking our hearts open, we could never step foot in a church and not encounter God in a deep way. That's when we move from just containing to embracing. It's not unusual for us to exclusively want to embrace that which makes us feel nice, warm, and fuzzy. What's more challenging is embracing the twists and turns of life. Who could blame us for that? In an effort to protect us, our brains communicate that embracing the twists and turns could result in us becoming disoriented. One thing I've learned, one thing I learned quickly when navigating Los Angeles is that sometimes the only way to avoid being stuck in LA traffic is to learn how to maneuver through the canyons. For a girl from Texas who is used to only flat roads, navigating the canyons seemed daunting. The lanes are generally narrow, the turns are sudden, and there are very few road signs. You know what else I learned? You can't discover the best views of the city unless you're willing to brave the mountains. The same is true to your life, my friend. When you begin this journey of embracing what you didn't want to see, it won't always feel good. Sometimes it will be downright scary and uncomfortable. That's okay. You can keep moving even in the scary and uncomfortable. You will come to a place where you look back over your life and recognize that your development didn't take place because everything went the right way. No, when you take inventory of your life, you will see that you were developed because you went through the fire and came out more refined. I have an exercise for the next time you are staring down a circumstance that you'd rather not see. I won't lie. This is going to sound kind of bold and crazy, but it's going to help you stretch your mind. Start asking yourself, I wonder what good could come of this. This isn't a question you ask yourself when first confronted with your trauma. This is a question that should be reversed for when you dare to peek beyond where you are and begin to question where you could be headed. If you can begin to ascertain even the smallest particle of goodness in a dark season, imagine what God can do. When recovering from the loss of a loved one, it may seem extracting the virtues of the life you're mourning and allowing them to live on in you. When grappling with a business that has gone under, it may mean assessing how you could build your teams or leadership style differently. You may have to stretch yourself into the land of impossible to try to imagine what could come of your trauma, but stretching your mind makes room for the impossible. I'm reminded of Ephesians 3:20. Paul wrote a letter to the church of Ephesus to help them establish themselves as a church. But in this verse, he gives us insight in God's character. He closed this portion of his letter by writing, now to him who is able to exceedingly apparently above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. When we go beyond containing and into embracing, by playing out how what hurt us could potentially work to make us better, we exercise the divine power in us. From there, God breathes on it and takes it to the realm of exceedingly and abundantly. Then one day you look up and be able to embrace what you didn't want to see because you are now able to contain it properly. A special note: as you've been reading this book, there, there may have been so many things that you did not want to see. Perhaps this book feels like the last lifeline you have left. I want to celebrate you for hanging on this long. So many other people would have given up by now, but you're still here, and even though it hasn't been easy, I guarantee you that the mountains you've climbed have undiscovered treasure. Your tenacity and perseverance are gifts this world so desperately needs. I pray one day you retrace your steps and share your tips on how to stay alive even after you've become records. Compare and release. Comparing what you see has nothing to do with looking at the life of the people around you and everything to do with daring to see your life the way God does. It's probably the part of this process that is the easiest to explain yet the most difficult to implement. Comparing what you see comes down to stretching your faith to look beyond your perspective on your situation and circumstance and daring to ask God to show you what it is. We are not really in any healthy relationship until we are willing to lay down our perspective and take on the perspective of the other person. To be honest, it's one of the most rewarding parts of marriage, but also the most annoying. Yes, I said annoying. You see, the thing is, from my perspective, I'm totally right and my husband is wrong. When I begin to look from his perspective, while taking into account his personality, character, and life experiences, then my narrative changes a bit. That's when things get annoying. I can no longer hang on to my right when I see his right too. One of the scriptures I see people quote quite often is Samuel 1 16:7. But the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees. For man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. We love to espouse that God looks at the heart, but we hardly ever go the extra mile to be like God in His way. I can't think of a better scripture to unpack the beauty of compassion that Samuel 1 16:7. This scripture is why we must be willing to step out of our feelings and emotions so that we can dare to ask God to soften our hearts. The ultimate goal is for us to come to a place where we can see people, circumstances, and opportunities the way that He sees them. This only works when we are willing to surrender our vision fully. You can't do this type of work if your agenda is ultimately be right. This kind of work is only fruitful when you are willing to completely abandon your position to see from every angle. And to be successful in this, you need God. When it comes to dealing with people, I ask God to show me the person's heart. The struggle with tense moments in relationships is that it often sweeps all the other moments after the rug. When my husband and I having one of those moments in our marriage, I begin inwardly discussing his lack of appreciation or acknowledgement for who I am in his life. I have to force myself to stop fanning the flames of my anger and then ask God to remind me of my husband's heart. Suddenly, an extinguisher is blown over my flame, and I'm left to deal with the true core of what has hurt me and the best way to communicate that from a place of love. Comparing what I see to what God sees shows up differently when I'm looking at an opportunity versus a person. When a person is involved, it's easier to get a gauge on their heart. When it's an opportunity, it's not always so straightforward. I make it a habit to ask myself, who will I become? Who will I have who will I have to become in order to pursue this opportunity? And is that person closer to or further away from who I am supposed to be in God? A deal may be lucrative, but but if it requires me to sacrifice my relationships, morals, and character, it's the devil in disguise. I learned to play dominoes with my uncles. You can imagine me being a young girl surrounded by older black men who trash talked at the dominoes table as they scored extra points of quips. Over and over again throughout the years, I'd hear one saying in particular, all money ain't good money. This saying is always this saying always let me know that a play had been made that set up an opponent for defeat. When we are comparing opportunities from our perspective versus God's, we must be willing to recognize that not every opportunity, no matter how good it looks on paper, is an opportunity that will produce the best version of ourselves. The right opportunity will not destroy the life God has given you, but it may change your life. Change and distraction are not the same thing, but change can become distraction if we don't navigate it with wisdom. The right opportunity may mean you have to strategize with the village around you to facilitate an environment for the opportunity to prosper. But if God is in the opportunity, then He's already barred provision to bring it to pass in your present. I can't think of any better example for compare and release than when we see Jesus in the garden preparing for the cross. Matthew 26 gives us insight into Jesus' mindsets beforehand. You can read the whole chapter to get the full context, but in layman's terms, I'm just going to tell you straight up. Jesus wondered if there was anyone else qualified who could be crucified instead of him. The chapter reveals to us that he didn't just leave it at that, though. He took it he took it a step further and released what he saw for what God the Father saw. Sometimes our pain, bitterness, and frustration sit with us sit with us so long that they become the only things we know. Believing that there's life beyond the pain requires so much faith that we'd rather stay tucked away in the darkness than risk having hope. As much as Jesus wanted to pass the cup, he also knew something else. There will be glory after this. Isn't it crazy? How even with the promise of glory, Jesus wanted to pass the cup. Sometimes we think if we are promised an outcome that will ultimately allow us to marvel at the plans of God, we will endure anything that stands in our way with gladness. Yet we see Jesus struggling with the cup that was coming his way. If Jesus had to pray to get ready for the road ahead of him, then we have to know there will be moments when we must do the same. You can know that you have glory on the way and still feel reluctant to face what's ahead of you. And that's okay. Every day is not meant to be easy, but every day can be a classroom, a learning experience that makes you better and wiser. I must admit that I have always held my prayer life close to me. My sister is what one would call a prayer warrior. She has no problem opening her mouth and praying with power no matter where she is. I'm naturally a bit soft spoken and I haven't always felt confident in my faith. So prayer was something I reserved for my own quiet time or as meditation in my mind. Prayer is an opportunity to be reminded of how God is and to bring our hearts into alignment with His purpose and will. It's not just a movement when we ask for what we need, but rather an opportunity to present ourselves fully. While some people are anointed to pray effortlessly, others need some guidance on the best way to open their hearts and invite God's presence with them. There are 4 steps to open your heart in prayer. Let's look at them one step at a time. Number 1, adoration. We don't always live in the consciousness of our adoration for God, but bringing your mind into a space of acknowledging the fullness of who God is expands your mind. If you take a moment and really look at how incredibly the earth is, you will have no choice but to honor God. The ocean didn't just come from nowhere, it was set in motion by a divine mind. When God set the ocean in motion, it never stopped moving. The brilliance of the stars, the heat the sun provides, the way all the earth works together to paint the most beautiful picture. It all began with God. I can then honor my life and I can then honor my life that I began as a seed and became a being. How magnificent it is that God created a system for my heart to pump, my body to move, and my brain to be the command center of it all. No differently than when we meet someone and are inspired because of what they've done. Adoration is an opportunity for us to recognize God's resume. With this fullness in mind, words start coming to your mouth. You are wonderful, you are majestic, you are a healer, you are a provider, you are perfect in all your ways, you are all knowing. Number two, confession. Prayer is the one place I can admit that I've fallen short, especially in comparison to who God is. I begin seeking forgiveness for complaining, doubting, bitterness, and frustration in my humanity. I may be justified for those feelings, but in the presence of God, I must consider what my actions communicate to Him. This is the space in which we bring all of ourselves to God. Number three, gratitude. Despite all the things I've done that have missed the mark in some way, God still granted me relationships, opportunities, and revelations that could have been given to another person. This is thanksgiving, it's intentional moments of reflection that allow us to acknowledge God. Number four, intercession. Intercession is when my will and God's will begin to wrestle. I make known the area of need that I have in my life. In that wrestling, I don't just ask God to give me what I'd like, but ask for God to qualify my desire in the first place. This is when we start saying things like, God, if this isn't your will for me, then take the desire away from me. When you go into prayer, you are armed with the promises and character of God. You can trust that God doesn't want to hurt you. He does not take joy in His creation suffering. And when God's creation suffers, it's because there's a greater glory that awaits them. The goal of prayer is to come out trusting there is glory and that awaits you. Prayer, prayer. It's the one sure way to find the release available in every situation, whether with people or circumstances. Use it to help open your eyes to God's truth. Sometimes there are moments when I ask God to show me someone's heart and He reveals to me that the person's heart needs God more than they need me. Um, but that just gave somebody the freedom they needed. The worst thing we can do in a relationship is to make ourselves God over their lives or allow them to become a God in our life. I think I've tried, but you're almost done. Oh my goodness. Sometimes what a person needs more than anything is not for us to rescue them, but for us to trust God with them. I'm thinking of so many of my friends who have sought to restore broken relationships It's difficult for us to comprehend what seems like a simple notion, but a heart doesn't have to be wicked to be toxic, and a toxic heart doesn't make a person evil. It simply means they need healing, but we can't provide the kind of healing they need. What do you do? What do you do when you aren't sure there will be glory after you drink from a cup that seems far better to survive? You remember that God has a track record of turning dark times into soil and pain into seed. This book is a testimony, not to my strength, but to my broken surrender. You may be waiting on a harvest for all that you've sown, but you are God's harvest, and He won't let you stay in the ground. Yo. There's something I read, which I want to read it out again because it just got my attention. I'll look for it. It's when she said, "You don't know until you know. You don't know until you know." That's gonna be our topic for today. Okay, guys. I want to thank you so much for watching this video to this end. Please, if you watched till the end, just leave a sweet comment on the comment section. Okay? And make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed. And bye guys. See you on to the next video.